to TechKnowCon. Welcome to part two of the Splunk talk. Before we get going, just really quickly, a little bit about us and how to participate. So please stay muted. Feel free to turn on your camera. We like seeing faces. And if you have any questions, and please do have questions, use the chat and send them to all. So we'll keep monitoring that and give Rajan and Gail an opportunity to answer either during or at the end of the talk. Follow us on LinkedIn, TechKnowCon, and Twitter as well. And we're always looking for people doing interesting things with team enablement and sharing the stories, just like Splunk is doing today. So a little bit about the history. So back in the day, Rajan, myself, and Jenny from Salesforce noticed that there was that how we approach learning and development at tech companies is different than a traditional sort of everyday business. We deal with technical folks. We deal with things that are constantly moving and changing, and the approach is different. And so we got together and started sharing our experiences. And so the initial kickoff was at LinkedIn back in 2018. In 2019, we repeated the annual conference at Twitter. So this photo on the left is actually from 2019. And then pandemic hit and we moved online. So we've been doing this on Zoom ever since. So about once a month we get together and one of you shares the story on how you do something that has to do with team enablement. And the picture on the right is somewhat newish from the holiday party, I believe, last year. And so you can kind of see that, they look mostly the same. So, yeah. So there's that. Behind the scenes, there's a little bit of a board that manages what we do and how we run TechKnowCon. Sarjan, you're gonna have a chance to hear from today. I saw Andrew online as well. Chris, formerly from Microsoft, and Katie, and of course behind the scenes it's Tomomi that does all the hard work, and I help moderate this. We have community guidelines. They're basically saying this is a community created for us by us. So just be a good citizen, and if you have any questions, there are more on this on the website, which is techknowcon.io. So before we jump into onboarding at Splunk, just really quickly, what do we mean by team enablement? So when we looked at all the activities that we do as part of the work, our jobs, we identified a number of such activities. So everything from functional onboarding to general knowledge sharing to enabling peer and collaborative learning. Of course, mentorship, coaching, and office hours, documentation, and finally, metrics to kind of figure out how things are going and what needs to be improved. So we kind of put an umbrella around this whole set of activities, and we call that enablement, or specifically for technical folks. Or so that's kind of how this started. And today we're going to be talking about the last one here. So both the first one, which is onboarding, but also metrics and insights, which is, I know, Rajan's favorite topic, on how do we close the loop and understand how things are actually performing. And just a quick plug. So we're going to be doing some more talks coming up. So stay tuned and follow us on, probably the Slack channel is the most active place. So Tomomi will share, if you're not part of the Slack channel, Tomomi will share the link how to join. So with that, I'll hand it over to Gail and Rajan at Splunk. Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Marco. And thanks for everyone for coming back for our part two. Stand by 1 second, just sharing my slides. All right. As Marco mentioned, this is a part two. Part one, I think Marco linked to our part one, where Gail spoke all about how we kind of structure and operate our technical onboarding at Splunk. We didn't necessarily have some time to speak about the section that I was meant to speak on, which is metrics and measurement for onboarding. So thank you so much for giving me more time to speak in this part 2. Okay, so kind of a tradition. Anytime I speak in meetings like this, I like to, our community to give back to each other. I know some folks might be having a more challenging time than others, but I would love to find opportunities for those that are seeking those. So for anyone here, if you are hiring right now, feel free to kind of raise your hand in Zoom. And yeah, or write in the type in the chat that you're currently having opportunities open within your organizations. And those that are looking for opportunities, please seek out those people and connect with them through the TechKnowCon Slack or other means. All right, so just want to do a quick Splunk tradition. Splunk is a data company, and we do something called million data points, which basically, each of us are a unique individual, and each of us have millions of data points that make us unique. And so I want to share my million data points, similar to what I did last week. Right now, I am the Director of Engineering Enablement at Splunk. That consists of technical onboarding, knowledge sharing, and also stuff like measuring different types of qualitative metrics to really give a full picture of the engineering experience. And we also do stuff like hackathons and fun stuff like that. Some of my background, I was raised in New Jersey, and you'll see pictures of Asbury Park on the bottom left. And I went to school in a small engineering school called Stevens Institute of Technology, which is right across the river from New York City. You see that on the bottom. I'm a father of 2 young girls, avid hiker, and also I'm kind of like a superhero nerd. You could probably tell from my toys in the background. And also here's a picture of me and my partner dressed up as Wanda and Vision on Halloween. And I was also kind of a guitar player in multiple bands in my former life. So that's a little bit about me and my million data points. Gail, can you share a little bit about yourself?
For sure. So I am a principal instructional engineer on the same team as Rajan there. Previously, I was at Shopify and Carlton U, did the academia thing for a while, all that good stuff. Yeah, you can see I like a lot of outdoor stuff too. Aerial hoop, for example. I don't normally do that in a Sailor Moon costume, but it's too fun of a picture to pass up. That was from Halloween one year. Love camping. You can see we got a trailer. The beach picture kind of beside the hoop there is another campsite where we can camp basically on the beach. Got to take advantage of winter so that you don't feel like you're suffering in snow. You want to love it. So we got to do some skiing. And we do scouting. So the whole family's in scouts one way or another. That's me and my daughter with her scouts troop. It is co-ed in Canada. And yeah, we 3/4 of us scuba dive. The youngest one isn't old enough yet, but I'm sure that he'll learn to eventually. So that's really cool too.
Awesome. Thank you, Gail. All right. Gail, want to kick us off with something a little bit about Splunk?
Sure. Yeah, so Splunk, I don't have my notes though. I wasn't prepared to do this. You want to do it since you have the notes in front of you?
Sure. So a little bit about Splunk. Real quick, short marketing spiel about Splunk. The purpose of the company really is to build a safer and more resilient digital world. Splunk is a remote first company. We've got key R&D hubs in key regions such as North America, Poland, India. And you might have learned that we recently were acquired by Cisco. So we're now Splunk, a Cisco company. The deal closed in March, and we're in the process of fully integrating and onboarding onto our now larger company. Cool. So for those of you that have not joined last time, we have a quick recap. So I'll kick off this recap by the typical TV show previously on TechKnowCon.
Yay. All right, cool. So, some key points from what I talked about primarily last time. So one thing that we talked about was what an instructional engineer is and why we think it's worth the investment to try to get one on your team if you can. When you're supporting engineers, it really helps when you have that engineering background, and it gives you all kinds of advantages. Maybe do some work faster, or to be able to create certain kinds of learning that would be a little harder to do if you don't have both the technical and the learning background. So, good to pay instructional engineers as much close to engineers as you can so you can attract them, but we think it's worth the investment. For onboarding itself, we talked about a few different aspects and how it connected to what we do at Splunk. We talked about the importance of community and how, different places are able to tap into community events and building a cohort in different ways. Sharing the culture and what your engineering culture is. The importance of sharing product knowledge, especially for a product like Splunk, which is, a pretty technical product and in domains that we may not really be super familiar with, even as engineers, like we do a lot of observability and security stuff. That's not an area I know a lot about. So it really helps to kind of understand where customers are coming from and how they're using the product, and even get hands-on with the product a bit. We talked about product ecosystem. Hey, we're not done. What's happening?
Sorry about that.
Too quick. We talked about product ecosystem, which is trying to get a systems view of how those products, so kind of getting under the hood a little bit, not to the depth of architecture diagrams, but seeing how it all connects together. So that's a really important piece as well. Tool setup is an obvious one, trying to make sure people are ready to go as much as possible. Challenging at Splunk because everybody's using different languages, tools, and so on, but we try to get, we're aiming to get a bit of a baseline there at least. And then finally, the importance of managers and buddies. We really have found in our feedback and in our observations that, if your manager is supporting you and you have a really good onboarding buddy assigned to you, can help you through the journey, it really helps, get going quickly. So super important aspect. Now we can go. So just a super quick recap of sort of the pieces of our onboarding. We'll have to go one by one here. So our first session is about welcoming them and talking a little bit about our culture. We have the voice of the customer, which is that product knowledge and the customer viewpoint. Intro to Splunk platform. This is not our only piece of software, but we decided to give it the most attention and hands-on time in the main bootcamp, largely because either you're working on the platform, or when you're working on other stuff, you get busy and you never come back to learn about the platform. And so this is kind of the one chance to make sure everyone gets a little bit of experience with it. We do a little bit on Splunk's technical history, which is pretty fun, kind of seeing how we got to where we are today and some of the mishaps along the way. Product ecosystem is that systems view I was just talking about. So kind of trying to build that diagram together and seeing all the pieces and how they communicate with each other. Software development lifecycle. So again, another fun one at Splunk because it's not really standard across all our different teams and products. Because teams have the empowerment to do things that work best for them. But we do have found some kind of fun, creative ways to make it work, to share how, generally speaking, software is developed at Splunk. And then after that, you kind of can get into deep dives for your own area. So if I'm joining observability, I want to be able to learn a little bit more about the products there, and maybe a bit of domain information about observability if I haven't worked in it before, and so on. So we do that for our three main areas: the platform, security, and observability. And we consider onboarding to be more than just your first boot camp. It's your full 45 days. And this is important when it comes to metrics because we'll tie back to this later. So in your 45 days of onboarding, we have our buddy program. So again, I mentioned the importance of buddies and the support you can get. With all teams doing things a little differently, it's impossible for us to create learning for every single one. So buddies are one way we can try to help make sure that the gaps are filled with somebody knowledgeable who can help you get through, your first tasks and setup and all that. We do also have team tracks and resources for some teams, and we continue to build more as the need arises. So this is sort of like, the nitty gritty kind of thing. And this is using tracks in So it's a collection of resources. We don't create the resources, but we're trying to curate it and kind of make it all be in one place and make it make sense for a particular team. We have additional learning programs in some cases. Like, for example, we developed a program on how to create apps at Splunk for the platform. This was a need that kind of came up through various channels, and it's very helpful for people joining a team who might be working on an app. And then we try to do what we can to get folks get their first code merged as quickly as possible. And again, remember that, because you'll hear more about that in terms of metrics.
Yeah, and just want to interject, there's a reason why we select 45 days. I know the typical standard for onboarding is 30, 60, 90 days, and I'll explain later why we landed on 45 days. And now time for part 2. Thank you so much, Gail. And so I would like to introduce this topic by thinking about what we do. What is our job? And so I'd like us all to take a minute to think about what really is your job, whether that job is within your team or your organization. What is your job? To help us, I have a Slido set up. And simply just go to slido.com or scan this in your QR reader and just simply answer that first question. I'll give everyone a minute. You could answer this any way you like. Any way you'd like. There's no wrong answers here. I'll start showing some results. Well, we're starting to get some really awesome answers here. Empowering technologists to do their best work, making Slack successful as a business, new hire onboarding, biz dev, decision maker, sales, operation, culture protection. Interesting. Helping organizations advance through learning, improve developer efficiency, enabling others to do their job more effectively, onboarding technical new hires, maintaining and creating technical curriculum, helping scale knowledge sharing via a platform. These are all fantastic answers. Oh, it looks like 2 people are still typing. Contracts operation. Awesome. Awesome. Cool. Thank you for sharing. This is great. And also gives me a great idea of who's attending this this session. Awesome. So the reason why I asked that question, there's an author, his name's Fred Kaufman. He wrote a book called Conscious Business. And within this book, there is kind of a controversial saying. The controversial saying is, your job is not your job. Your job is actually to help your team win. And so within that book, goes into an analogy, maybe a soccer analogy or a sports team analogy. And there are people who, obviously help their team win. These are folks like people who, make shoot goals. But then there are also folks on the defense that don't necessarily score points, such as goalies or people on the defense. But regardless of what your role is, ultimately, your job is to help your team win. Whether that's you consider your team your peers, whether you consider your team your higher organization, or even your company. You're at your company to help your team win. So I have another question. How do you know if your team is winning? I have another Slido poll here. Feel free to answer your question. How do you know if your team is winning? So feel free to type in. As I mentioned, there's no wrong answers here. Looks like we've got some really interesting answers here. Pulse surveys, direct feedback, KPIs. They're motivated, leveraging their strengths. No one complains. That's great. Feedback, KPIs, in the performing stage of team development. Oh, that's norming, storming, norming, performing. Sales are closed. Yeah, great. Feedback from customers, metrics. Nobody quits or is fired. Scoreboard. Awesome. Nothing is broken. New engineers complete their new developer experience. Great. Customers give great feedback. People say they're happy. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. Oh, there's one more person typing. Satisfaction with Edge onboarding. Cool. Cool. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. So how do you know if your team is winning? And, most of the time, when you think of sports teams or even video games, many times you're winning or not by keeping score. There are many different types of scores, especially in different contexts. And the majority of this presentation is kind of how our team keeps score within our organization and how we keep score to know if we're helping our company win as well. And we do this through metrics. All right. So before I move on, I have one more question. I like to keep this interactive. And I always start out my metrics conversations with this one question. Why are onboarding programs so expensive? So feel free to answer the next question. In Slido, would love to know why different perceptions of why onboarding and training programs are so expensive. I ask this every time I deliver this similar type of content. So some of you who have seen my presentation before might know what I'll see next. Expensive compared to what? Time of participant. Can't fail if you spend enough mentality, specialized knowledge, maybe. Who says they're expensive? They might not be expensive. Requires folks with both very deep and wide knowledge of an organization. We're taking folks' valuable time. That's expensive. Perceived value. Yes. Expensive is relative value. We may not understand the ROI, the cost associated with doing it poorly. Upgrades to systems and chasing trends to put metrics in an intelligent manner. Cool. Those are all great. And so I have a specific philosophy in terms of why training programs are so expensive. And so, yes, it does take time to put together an onboarding program. It takes people. So it takes the people that are designing the program. It takes time of subject matter experts, so their time is expensive. And it also takes time to deliver and operate the program, so that's expensive. But the most expensive part of an onboarding program are the employees' times who are actually taking the onboarding. And so many companies have different scales of onboarding programs. Some of them might be basically non-existent, and some of them can last days or weeks. However, those days or weeks really eat into company time. And so you want to know and express and demonstrate, is the time that they're spending with your program providing high value to the company? And are you providing the right knowledge and experience and skills so that they're able to be productive? Conversely, if you even teach the wrong things, that can have a negative impact on the company and can even be more costly for the company. So that's why measurement is so important. It's important for a few reasons. One, it holds your team accountable, especially for if you're part of organizations that don't really know what you do. It really helps demonstrate the value of your organization, and also it helps you be accountable for what you're responsible and expected to do for your team or your organization. Many of you probably are a single person team or part of a small team. And in terms of measurement, your leaders won't know how to measure you. They'll look up to you to tell them how to measure success. It also helps understand your audience pain points and helps you prioritize on what to focus on. So many times, folks like us fall into the trap of just taking orders. And so leaders from above give you their opinion on what you need to focus on. And sometimes prioritization happens with kind of squeaky wheels, or who are the loudest in the rooms. So having the right measurement and metrics in place help lead that conversation and make your decisions and prioritization more data-driven. It also helps you know when your programs need improvement. It empowers you to deliver solutions more in an iterative and incremental manner, with room to experiment with things as well. And last but not least, it also builds trust with your leadership, knowing that you're producing concrete evidence that this demonstrates high business value. All right. So I'm just curious, more interaction coming. What kind of metrics do you use to measure your onboarding program? So please go back to Slido and let's answer the next question. Nice. Quality, post onboarding, satisfaction, NPS, other, time to first code merge. Cool. So it seems here, if everyone is done, not sure if everyone is, usually the typical ways that it seems your organizations measure your onboarding program is through satisfaction, NPS, domain-specific business metrics. Interesting. Oh, looks like we have others in the chat. Butts and seats, completion. So I'm going to walk through kind of the different levels of measurement that we actually apply within our team at Splunk. As I mentioned, there's different ways to keep score. And for a broad organization, keeping score can get quite complex. For the next few slides, it'll mostly be within the context of technical or engineering enablement. But if you're in a different domain, I think that's fine. I think you could leverage some of the concepts here with your own context. So when I started in the learning field, I became a huge fan of Kirkpatrick and his levels of evaluation. So his levels of evaluation can be quite dogmatic, as in there are some folks that are really keen on following it very strictly. We believe in following it kind of a little bit with more flexibility, and we've adopted it to what makes sense to us within engineering at Splunk. So I'll walk through each type at a high level. The first two types, so the first type really isn't in Kirkpatrick, but that is something that we keep track of, which is usage and adoption. Because frankly, it's hard to measure effectiveness of your programs if no one is using it. And so we do track the level of engagement and participation in our programs. Acceptance and satisfaction is based on the first level of Kirkpatrick. So engagement and satisfaction should look very familiar to most people here. And so, satisfaction is really good when trying to see if your learners actually accept the type of learning that you're giving them. Next is Kirkpatrick level 2, which is right in the middle, which is learning. And so this is where we're able to really capture if our programs are producing its intended outcomes. The third way we apply Kirkpatrick is through the bottom left, which is application. And here we determine whether or not the folks that have attended our programs or engaged with our programs are actually applying what they've learned to their jobs, and if they find value in the programs that they've taken. And last but not least is Kirkpatrick level 4, which is ROI, or business value. And so this one's a little harder to measure. However, it provides an incredible amount of strong evidence that you can show business leaders that you're actually providing impact and value to the organization. All right. The top two are probably the most tactical. It's the easiest to measure. The more you go down in this diagram, the harder it is to measure and the more expensive it is to measure. So you could think of the top two as a little bit more tactical, while the bottom two are a little bit more strategic. And we're going to go into each of these and how we apply these in our organization at Splunk. And how do we capture this data? Now, for usage, satisfaction, application data, we actually leverage a lot of plus plus. So plus plus is our main learning experience platform and LMS. And so all of our training programs, including all different types of our technical onboarding and ongoing learning, are delivered through plus plus. And so we leverage plus plus's GraphQL API, and we have it produce, we leverage that API to produce reports right in Google Sheets. And Gail here is talented enough that she's able to produce some really useful dashboards for us to look at using data within plus plus. Anything you'd like to add there, Gail?
Maybe just to mention like how we're doing a tiny bit more. So this is using the Google App script. So you can create custom formulas and then, put the data right into the spreadsheet, make charts out of it and stuff. And the reason why we do that is because, the basic like fundamental dashboard in plus plus is obviously going to be generic, right? It doesn't know how we want to use the data. And so it can be useful for certain things, but we're able to then automatically calculate MPS and that kind of stuff right in the spreadsheet, which is really nice. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Gail. Now, for our business value metrics, one of the things that we measure are how quickly folks start coding and how quickly they start committing code and merging their code. And we do that through combining a few systems. Our main source code management tool and CI/CD tool is GitLab at Splunk. And so we leverage some of the data that we receive in GitLab and also people data that we get from Workday. And we created a dashboard for ourselves to look at some of these metrics. And this is a great way to take a look at kind of trends of how quickly new hires are starting to get productive within their organizations. And also, we're able to drill in and see where certain bottlenecks are so that we can investigate further why some folks are not being, or some teams are not having their new hires be as productive compared to other teams. All right, so let's first start off with usage and adoption. As I mentioned, this is one of the tactical metrics that we use, and we use this to really make sure that people are using our programs. Some of the metrics that we use here are things like, are people attending our live boot camps? Are they engaging with some of our self-paced boot camps if they're taking a self-paced version? We also measure things such as assign, who are assigned these onboarding programs such as engineering boot camp. If it's self-paced, how many people actually started, and the level of completion they have. So if they are taking a self-paced version, for example, we understand that self-paced may not necessarily be engaged with sequentially. And so, many times folks engage with it from a very informal manner. And therefore, we look at the level of completion that people have. So they may not complete every single module in it, but we're interested in seeing which modules did they actually engage in the most and how much did they complete in it. On the right-hand side, you see some of the awesome charts that Gail scripts produced for us. So we're able to take a look at how many new hires were assigned for a specific month, how many people actually started it, and how many people actually completed it. All right. Acceptance and satisfaction. Now, this is done through a survey that folks complete right at the end of a program, whether that's live or self-paced. They're solicited a survey, and the key metric in this survey is NPS. The reason why we use NPS is because our boot camps are not required. So folks might not even want to engage with it at all. And so NPS really gives us a signal whether or not the people want to recommend this non-required things to others. And it becomes a signal of how useful they found it. So opportunities that we've found from it is, should we change the learning experience of this? Should we, are people finding high value in this? And if not, should we go back and redesign certain modules so that it increases that NPS metric? The next one is learning, and a lot of times through instructional design, we bake in this type of measurement right into the course. So many different types of learning solutions have assessed learners through things like quizzes, but we have different unique approaches to how we like to assess the way that learners are retaining a lot of the knowledge and skills that they're learning in their programs. So Gail is our lead instructional engineer, so I'll just pass it on to Gail real quickly to talk more about how we assess learning within our programs.
Yeah, thanks. And this one, honestly, I'm pretty passionate about. I feel like a lot of places kind of skip this level and don't ever actually measure whether there's learning. And to me, it's kind of like, how do you know anything after that is because of what you made if you don't even know that they achieved the outcome you set out to have them achieve, right? So to me, it's like super important. You don't have to have formal metrics. You don't have to have beautiful graphs about it, although you can. There are ways to do that. But, just make sure that when you're making stuff, like, number one, make sure it's not a lecture. Number two, make sure you're designing it so that you have a way to see, are they achieving the outcomes you set out? So just a few examples of what we've done. There's 2 examples showing here. One of them is in our product ecosystem session. That's the one with the systems view, kind of looking under the hood of the products. We do a pre and post quiz. And we do it as sort of like a learning tool. It's kind of a fun thing. We're kind of like, hey, we know you're not going to know the answers at the beginning, but see what you can figure out by guessing or based on the knowledge you've learned so far in boot camp. And we expect that to be pretty low. But then it gets them primed to receive all the information and to do the other activities and like look for the answers. And then we do the post quiz at the end, right? And that's really cool because, we use Google Forms for that. You can really see. So if you did want to have metrics, you can see exactly what % are getting it correct before and after, and you see a good increase, and it's very cool that way. You can even do this in self-paced courses though, right? So the little picture there, it says share your answers. This is a snapshot from a self-paced course that we have in our bootcamp. So what I do is, we use Rise to create it, and then we have the SCORM, and that goes on ++. But so in the Rise course, we have this sort of like conversational, multiple choice, etc. type thing going on. So getting them to think about things and so on. But then we also have places where we're like, hey, here's the thing we want you to do. Write down your answers, and at the end, you can submit them all together. And by submitting them, you'll also get access to everybody's answers they did before. So hopefully that's a little incentive to get people to submit. And so I have an alert on my form that says, oh, somebody submitted something. So I can go in and see exactly what they wrote. And, in one of my courses, I'm up to like 75 submissions, which I think is amazing because people might do the course and not submit. They might still learn, but I think it's amazing that 75 people took the time to write up the answers, submit it, and hopefully check out other answers. So yeah, tons of creative ways you can do this. And just like my message to everyone is don't forget about it, because again, how do you know then that they're succeeding because of you or in spite of you, right? So there you go.
Yeah. I'd love to share one anecdote that Gail implemented recently. One of the recent sessions that we had to give, we had to thousands of Cisconians, we had to introduce them to the Splunk enterprise platform. And so part of this session was Gail asking folks to kind of drag and drop different components of a deployment architecture diagram. Granted, no one had any previous knowledge of it. And so, and we did not provide any information. This was just blindly, can you complete this diagram with the components given? And there was some level of frustration. Some people like, why are you asking me to do this? You haven't told me anything yet. but we really wanted to challenge them in what they might already know. And so after a few minutes of the course and Gail providing content, she asked them to do it again. And this time most of them were able to actually complete the diagram correctly. And we got a tremendous response in that, where people were able to assess for themselves where their gaps exist, truly pay attention to the part of the content where those gaps exist, and are able to demonstrate that they actually learned the content by showing us how they did in the final diagram. So application of knowledge. So for our onboarding programs, as Gail mentioned before, we do a survey, and we distribute the survey 45 days after a new hire has started at the company. And why did we choose 45 days? The typical framework for onboarding is 30, 60, and 90 days. And one thing that we observed is if we start soliciting feedback from folks 60 or 90 days, we don't get a high amount of returns. So around those times, new hires are already starting to get fully engaged and engrossed in their work. So having them provide feedback at the level of responses that we'd like to have just wasn't there. 30 days might not be enough time for new hires to really know how they're doing in their jobs and if they're really applying what they need to apply. And so that's where we kind of landed at 45 days. It's a good halfway point within that 90-day framework. And it's a good amount of time for new hires to really get to know what they need to know, what they need to do for their jobs, and give us feedback whether or not the resources that were given to them was actually valuable. And so the metrics that we use here is something that we call a confidence score, as well as an NPS for all of the resources that we provided them. The KPI here, though, is confidence score and not the NPS of our onboarding programs. The reason why we chose confidence score of the KPI is because that is a signal that changes regardless what resources new hires are given. And so that is a good metric to look at to see what gaps exist and see if those metrics improve or not. If we use the NPS of our onboarding programs, it gives us less of a signal whether or not a problem is actually being solved. And so that's why we use confidence score as our KPI, but we do keep track of both. And here you see kind of a chart using some of Gail's awesome scripts to help us really follow the trends, whether or not there's high confidence or low confidence, and how is that in correlation with the NPS of our programs. And finally, business value. So the KPI that we use for business value is time to first merge. We associate that with cost. And so the amount of time that engineers are not producing work or outcomes that are expected of them really come as a sunk cost for a company. And so we've really positioned ourselves within our organization to say, hey, if you invest in our team and allow our team to implement what we need to, the agreement is that we'll reduce cost in terms of onboarding and having your teams be productive. And so we're able to track this, as I mentioned, through data that we've gotten from our source code repository, which is GitLab, and use Splunk as a dashboard to really track how productivity with new hires happen through time. And one of the great things that we've realized is that ever since we implemented our first official onboarding program, which is Engineering Bootcamp, and additional deep dive tracks, the time to first merge over 2 years has really reduced 30 to 40% year over year. And so therefore, we're able to take this data and present this to leadership and have them really understand the evidence that's needed in order to demonstrate what kind of value that our team provides to the company and the organization. One last question. I know we only have a few minutes left, but one last question I'd like to ask each of you is how often do you review or analyze onboarding metrics with your team? So let's quickly go through that in Slido. Cool. It looks like most folks uh, review their onboarding metrics quarterly, some monthly, some weekly. Awesome. I'm glad no one selected almost never. So this is when our team actually observes and analyze our metrics. One, we analyze our metrics annually, and this usually comes with helping our team define annual goals and also aligning with our organization's OKRs. One of the best things you can do, and one things that we've done recently, is actually put our metrics as part of the official organizational OKRs. So onboarding metrics such as confidence score and time to first merge are actually in the top line engineering OKRs within Splunk. We also observe our metrics quarterly, and we do that with helping us define and set quarterly goals. And finally, we actually take a look at our metrics once a week. And so we actually start off all of our meetings with metrics. One, to help us drive towards being a data-driven team. And two, to help us understand if we're tracking towards those goals that we've set quarterly and annually. And make any changes needed from a tactical perspective if those metrics are not going in the direction we'd like them to. And finally, I'd like to just close out by saying that having a good practice around measuring and metrics really help apply the scientific method. And so many times projects occur because a leader asks you to do something, or because you think it's just the right thing to do. But if you already have a set of data and metrics that you're used to baseline, that helps you form hypotheses if you notice gaps within your onboarding programs that need to be improved. And so having these metrics helps you form hypothesis and really propose a quick experiment to see whether or not implementing a new program quickly and cheaply can achieve the results that you're looking for, without spending so much time to put together a fully fledged program and guessing whether or not that will actually have a large impact in the end. All right, and with that, I think that really closes out everything. Really want to thank everyone for watching our presentation today and engaging in all the interactions, and hopefully we have some time for questions. I know there's only 2 minutes left. Marco, do we have time for questions?
Sure. Let's open it up. Anybody has any burning questions? And as usual, we will transcribe this and create video recording that you can share, as well as possibly post the slides.
Gail, do you know if there was a question that we might have missed in the chat?
Wasn't a question we missed? I know Benji had made an interesting comment about sort of like finding it challenging to get through all the metrics, and I thought if Benji was still here and interested, it'd be cool to hear a little bit more about the challenges and how it compared to what we ended up doing?
Yeah, more than I can put together into a 60-second. Yep, nope. Another time.
Sounds good.
So we do measure time to first merge, and getting that metric accurate actually takes some work. So it takes some time to actually develop that metric and put it into a dashboard, but it also requires tweaks over time because there's so many variables that lead to different margins of error. So it does take some time to get that right. But it's produced some great outcomes for us, especially in terms of identifying where gaps are. All right.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you taking your time to spend with us today talking about metrics. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks, Gail. Thanks, Rajan. Great to see you all. Bye.
Everyone.